Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Tánaiste, I want to raise some important questions on the issues of workers' rights. I wanted to begin on a positive note with the coming into effect of the banded hours legislation this week. I have been informed by Mandate, which represents workers in the retail sector, that there has been a significant uptake in union memberships on the basis of this legislation and a huge interest in applying for the extra hours. However, the situation is complicated by what appears to be a joint approach by some of the major employers, such as Dunnes Stores, Lloyds and SuperValu, who have banded together to come to this arrangement that they're assisting the workers sign what they call now a new banded hours contract, which I understand contains a threat of disciplinary action, even dismissal, if workers fail to work the hours outlined in these new contracts. Now, I'm putting to you, Tánaiste, and I'm glad the Minister is here, that there should be a close monitoring of this legislation and the implementation of it over the next period of time, because I really do believe there's going to be skullduggery around this in trying to scare the workers again into not uptaking these banded hours. Also, recently, I've been approached by workers in the new, very swanky and expensive Ivy restaurant, where the company are taking the major proportion of tips paid to staff and are using these tips to make up the difference in their wages. And I'll give you an example. One worker signed a contract back in October for $14.90 an hour. They're now being paid $9.80 an hour, and the difference has been made up with the tips. So this company is robbing the workers of their money, and we don't know where the rest of the money is going to. It seems to be pocketed by the company. The staff working in the sector are reliant on tips to make up a reasonable wage to enable them to get by and to get, for example, afford the outrageous rents being charged in the city for accommodation. This wage theft is an increasing practice in the sector. There's been reports in Galway in the restaurant industry. A bill has come through the Senate on this issue, and I expect it will receive widespread cross-party and indeed government support for that legislation. Finally, I want to raise the issue of the ongoing dispute for union recognition by ambulance paramedics who are members of the P&A in the health service. It is not an incredible, is it not, Tánaiste, an incredibly bad signal for a major employer, a state employer such as the HSE, refusing to recognise the rights of ambulance paramedics to be represented by a union of their choice. An officially registered trade union, P&A, which already represents staff in the health service, and even worse for the HSE to refuse an invitation to attend the WRC. I'm putting to you, Tánaiste, that your government and your minister should instruct the HSE to go to the WRC, which P&A, the Psychiatric Nurses Association, have already stated they are prepared to go to.
Thanks, Deputy. A lot of questions there. Let me try and answer some of them. I think that this government's record in relation to try to protect workers, particularly around minimum wage increases, is very strong, and I think it will continue to be in terms of taking independent advice on an annual basis. Just on the tips issue, let me just be very clear. Any employer that calculates salary and includes tips in that figure is acting illegally. You can't do it. Tips are separate to salary, and if there are issues that the government needs to act on there, well, then we'll look at that closely. If there are loopholes in relation to the new legislation that are being abused, we'll close them. In relation to the new legislation, which has been welcomed, I think, across the trade union movement generally, certainly by ICTU. I listened to Patricia King welcome that earlier on in the week. This is a sensible and pragmatic way forward that involves some compromise, but does provide significant increased protection for workers. And that is what we are trying to do here, in a way that's fair and in a way that has listened to concerns of employers, but has struck what we regard as a fair balance, and I think that across the trade union membership that would be reflected also. In relation to trade union recognition by the HSE, in relation to ambulance workers who want to be represented by the P&A rather than SIPTU. That is an industrial relations issue where the HSE has to make a judgment call in terms of how we maintain a proper industrial relations infrastructure and relationship between unions and employers. And the position of the HSE and the government, I think, is pretty clear on this issue. And there would be different views and perspectives across trade unions in relation to the approach here. So, of course, anyone has a right to join a trade union, but that doesn't mean that the trade union necessarily has the right to be recognised per se by an individual employer if there's another trade union that is representing the concerns and rights of those workers. So that's an ongoing dispute, Deputy, but I think the government's position on it has been made pretty clear.
Deputy Collins.
He boasted that this was the best country to do business in. But it's not the best country for a lot of workers facing exploitation by employers. And I have to say, I think it's extraordinary that you, as a government, are saying that an employer decides who represents a worker in a workplace. That's what you're saying, the employer decides, not the worker, which is a basic human right to be represented by a trade union of their choice. It's not up to the HSE to make that decision. It's not up to SIFT to make that decision. It is to go to the WRC, where all issues will be discussed and decided upon and recommendations will be made. If the WRC says those workers are entitled to be in a union of their choice, well, that's c'est la vie, that's the decision made. And if not, they can go to the European courts to challenge that. And you're denying these workers that right by not instructing the HSE to basically go to the WRC. And that's the issue here. It's not up to the HSE to decide where those workers should be represented and what union should represent them. So I think it's a basic human right. You're denying them the human right, and I really would urge you to reconsider your position in relation to this.
Thank you. Tánaiste, to conclude, please.
Yeah, Deputy, first of all, in relation to the previous Taoiseach's comments of trying to make Ireland the best small country to build a business in and to work in. I mean, I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we have the second highest minimum wage in Europe now, and we're very proud to have that. And at the same time, we are maintaining a competitive economy that is creating jobs every single day. That's not an easy thing to do, both of, and we will continue to try to manage an economy that protects workers in terms of their rights, that pays them a decent wage for a week's work. We will continue to take independent advice on where the minimum wage should be in Ireland and act on that as a government. And at the same time, we will continue to talk to employers about the supports that they need to be able to build and grow competitive businesses out of Ireland. And that approach has worked, Deputy, very well in the last 7 years. Where we have seen unemployment fall in Ireland from over 15% now to just over 5% and continuing to fall month on month. So that is the approach that we will continue to take. And I think the issues in relation to the approach of the HSE on the other issue that you mentioned, I think are well understood and debated at this stage.
Thank you very much.